Hello everybody, so with the Avatar of Zero event, it's going to be coming out in about a month. I'm going ahead and I'm just going to get all my characters moved over to stronger builds. So the one I'm using on the Druid is going to be Stormclaw. Now this build can do everything. I have killed Uber Lilith with it, Duriel, everything. Right? It's very, very good. However, the one downside of this build is it requires a great staff of the Crone. Otherwise you can't really play the build because it relies on using Claw to proc a bunch of lucky hit effects and stuff like that. So if you want to know where to target farm Great Staff of the Crone, if you're not familiar, come over here. Once you get to World Tier 3, you'll be able to go to the Malignant Burrow. You can summon Varshan there. What you do to get the parts to summon Varshan is just complete Whispers, and then you'll find the parts inside of the Tree of Whispers once you get to World Tier 3 or higher. If you're on World Tier 3, it takes a head, a hand, and a femur. If you are on World Tier 4, it's going to also take you a heart, a head, a hand, and a femur. Alright, so it takes 3 on World Tier 3 and 4 pieces on World Tier 4, and that is how you can actually just go ahead and target farm that. So, just to go ahead and hop in. So first off, we have Aspect of Might. We're going to go basic skill attack speed, total armor, max life, cooldown reduction. On the chest piece, we're going to go percent total armor, damage reduction from close, damage reduction from poisoned enemies, damage reduction while fortified. On the gloves, we're going to go Edge Masters. This is a core skillless build, so this is actually pretty good. It's just going to make our claw do 20% more damage multiplicatively. So we have 10% attack speed, 8% crit, critical strike damage, Lural Skulls, and lucky hit chance. This is going to be the only unique that I generally run. That I just generally run whenever I'm in, because right now this setup is capable of doing Nightmare Dungeon 100s. If I was just doing like a general setup, I would also run things like Godslayer, Crown, and even like Mad Wolf's Glee are both pretty good. As long as you're not doing high Nightmare Dungeons, you can run all uniques in every single slot. However, if you are doing high Nightmare Dungeons, you're going to need the damage reductions and you're going to need the extra armor that these gives. Otherwise, you're going to find that you're kind of a glass cannon and you're going to start dying a lot. That being said, you can still run Tybalt's Will inside of high Nightmare Dungeons. This is the one that I run all the time. This is a setup that I do in anything regardless of the difficulty, and then if I go do Ubers or Helltides or something, I'll throw on the Godslayer, Crown, and then the Mad Wolf's Glee just for fun. Okay. Also, if you do not have Tybalt's, you just go quad damage reduction pants and then put like Vigorous Aspect or something like that on there, since you're in werewolf form all the time. Next up, we are going to have Ghostwalker Aspect. We're going to want movement speed, percent total werewolf form, and then 2 resistances of your choice, whichever one. So just kind of look at your resistances, what you have, what your gear is. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Just make sure that, however you do your resistances, they add up to 70%. I have cold and fire on mine, but I'm actually a little overcapped on cold, and I'm also a little overcapped on fire as well. So, and the reason, and also another thing, is that you really want to make sure you have move speed on here, because we are going to be running Ravenous, and with Ravenous, you get attack speed based off of how much move speed you have. So remember that. It's very important that you have just normal flat movement speed, not the movement speed after an elite enemy, because that only lasts for like 3 seconds, whereas the movement speed buff lasts forever. Okay, so then with the Ghostwalker Aspect, we become unstoppable with Metamorphosis, as well as Earthen Bulwark, so we're able to proc that a lot, and that also translates to another attack speed buff. Okay. Great Staff of the Crone. So what this is going to do is make your claw into a storm skill, and also now cast Storm Strike at 138% normal damage. It's important to have this because we're going to be running things like Rune Workers, and you need to be able to do lightning damage. So if you don't have this, it does not make Claw do lightning damage for some reason. So you need it to be able to cast Storm Strike in order to be able to proc your overcharge loop and stuff like that. Next up, we are just going to go Rapid Chain. Basic skills gain 39% attack speed. This is just pretty good. Pretty self-explanatory. Huge attack speed buff. You're going to want movement speed, damage reduction from close, cooldown, and ranks of Envenom. Then you're going to be going Rune Workers Ring. There are 2 setups with this. You can either go Rune Workers Conduit Ring here, or you can go Aspect of the Mighty Storm. If you go Aspect of the Mighty Storm, remember to switch from Ursine's Strength over to Earthen Might, just to make sure that's how that, because that's what Mighty Storm does, is it makes your storm skills work with your Earthen Might passive. It's pretty nice. But honestly, I haven't really seen a difference between the two, because if you don't run Aspect of the Mighty Storm, you get to also run Runeworker's Conduit, which adds a little bit of damage. I would say Earthen Might's probably a little bit more consistent, but either or works, whatever you have and whatever you prefer. Alright, so on the rings, you're going to want Critical Strike chance, damage to close, damage to distant, and max life. If you're wondering why we go close and distant, it's because in Season 2 there was a rework to Thunderstruck. So by stacking that, we get a multiplicative damage buff. We get 20% of our damage versus close and distant as a multiplicative damage multiplier to our storm skills. So by stacking that, I'm getting a 50% multiplicative damage multiplier to my claw and my storm strike. So that's pretty good. Next we have Overcharge Loop. So whenever we do lightning damage, we have a chance to make things pulse to additional damage around. This is pretty good if you get into like a really dense pack. You're just going to see numbers go everywhere. Same thing as before, Critical Strike chance, close, distant, and then max life. You can go Critical Strike damage, I guess, if you want. You also could go like the fourth ones. I mean, I guess kind of personal preference. I prefer max life, honestly, over everything, just because I like a little bit of the extra defense. But you could go Critical Strike damage or lucky hit chance as well in that fourth spot. Okay, and then when it comes to gems, again, so I have mine set up with Lightning Resist and then Shadow Resist. So yep, and then also on my ring I have Poison Resist, and on my ring I have Shadow Resist. So depending on like what kind of resist you have on your rings, that's going to kind of alter how you do your elemental resist. So it's going to be kind of hard for you to necessarily just straight up copy my resistance setup, because you might just have different rings, and I have everything here like for a specific way, I guess. So that being said, and then also I just run the armor ones in place if I don't need any resistances. Spirit Boons, Wariness, Swooping Attacks, Bolster, Overload, so dealing lightning damage is up to a 40% chance to cause a target to an static discharge. This just paired with our Overcharge Band, it's just a really good combination. Alrighty, so moving on into our abilities. We have Claw, Enhanced Claw, Wild Claw, Storm Strike, Enhanced Storm Strike, Fierce Storm Strike. We're going Predatory Instinct, Digitigrade Gate. I think I said that right. I have no idea. But the reason why we max these out is because we actually do have a decent amount of multipliers, so even maxing out Storm Strike I think is worth it. But yeah, and this also is going to make things vulnerable for us, as well as give us an immobilize effect, and then this has a chance to attack twice on top of giving us extra attack speed with Claw, so we just attack real fast and proc our effects. Claw also has a really high lucky hit coefficient, so it just procs lucky hit effects a lot. We're going to go Earthen Bulwark, Enhanced Earthen Bulwark, Preserving Earthen Bulwark. I like to do this just because it stacks up the Fortify really fast. If you just cast all of these at once, you'll pretty much be fortified like instantly, because we are running Bolster, which every time we cast a defensive skill fortifies us. Okay then. Then we go Cyclone Armor, Enhanced, Preserving. This is going to give us a nice damage reduction debuff, or not debuff but buff. And then Blood Howl, and Enhanced Blood Howl Preserving. This gives us another attack speed steroid, which is pretty nice. It also has its own cooldown reduction on kill, so it's up quite a lot. Moving right along, we're going to go Elemental Exposure, so our storm skills have a chance to make things vulnerable, and pretty much everything we're hitting them with is a storm skill, so we make things vulnerable very easily with this build. Endless Tempest, increase the duration of Hurricane and Cataclysm. Now, there's two options for this. So I have Petrify on right now. You can also run Cataclysm, and it actually does a decent amount of damage because of the new Thunderstruck rune and stuff like that. So, and it also procs a bunch of those lucky hit effects as well, because it does do lightning damage. So it is actually pretty good to run, and you'll see it can do quite a lot of damage. And it also has a very high lucky hit chance on it. So definitely recommend Cataclysm if you're doing dungeons that don't have a boss at the end. If they do have a boss at the end, Petrify is pretty good for helping speeding up your bossing, and I think if you're doing Ubers, you're going to want Petrify. The dungeons I was doing did have bosses. I was running specifically like Goa Runes, and you're going to find that like the glyph leveling ones typically do have a boss at the end, like the good glyph leveling ones. It's typically just run straight to a boss, so it's probably better to run Petrify more often than not. But one thing you can do is you can take a couple points out of Endless Tempest if you don't want to focus on having this up longer, and then put it over here into like Electric Shock or something like that, and it'll increase any lightning damage dealt to them by goes up to like 21%, I think. So it's not too bad, not too shabby at all. I go Neurotoxin, Toxic Claws, and I go Toxic Claws just to proc the Neurotoxin. And then Envenom, this just gives us a 50% bonus, critical strike damage bonus against poison enemies. So by taking the 1 point of Toxic Claws, it gives us kind of a pretty good setup, a bunch of extra damage. Okay, and then it also helps us proc our damage reduction from poisoned enemies and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool too. Okay. Here we go. We have Natural Disaster. So Storm skills deal 12% increased damage to enemies that are stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. And then after that, I go Ursine Strength. And then like I had said before, you can either go Ursine Strength or you can go Earthen Might. I think both are fine. Aspect of the Mighty Storm, I think, is a little bit more consistent. I've been running this setup, kind of trying it out. I think this setup's fine. It doesn't really feel that different to me. I don't know, maybe I'm insane. But both setups feel a little bit equal. I just think this one, I don't know, I think the damage uptime might be a little bit more, because I know it says 5%, but you actually keep it up quite a lot, so it's not too bad. Alright, moving on into the Paragon, and I'll have a link in the description with this full build and Paragon board. I think I could do a little bit of work to the Paragon, but right now this is what I have. So go around here. I like to come back here just to get the free 20% damage. So that's pretty nice. I go Territorial in the first one. So this is going to give us a nice 10% damage reduction against close enemies, as well as giving us 68% increased damage to close enemies. Actually, I think it was a little higher. This is only like level 18, yeah. So actually, this is still a little low. I come over here. I like to swing over here and pick up the All Resist. This is going to help you. If you are having resistance problems, feel free to like just leave points out of so you see how I went up to like 40 here. You can just give up some of the damage and then put it into All Resist early on, because you don't need that much damage to do World Tier 3. Like you should have plenty of damage. So you can actually afford to give up a couple of nodes here, so you can put things in like All Resist until you get higher item level like jewelry and stuff like that gives you better All Resist. So that's something you can do. So then we're going to come up here into the Thunderstruck node. This is going to be our main, probably our biggest damage increase. I think is gonna come here with this Thunderstruck. And you don't necessarily need to rush and go into this one first, unless you actually, like if you're leveling up into this. If you don't have like the close and distant on your rings, then Thunderstruck is kind of useless. Well, it's not useless, I guess, because you do still get damage reduction or damage to close enemies on your Cronestaff. But if you have a lower level Cronestaff, that modifier is going to be lower, so it's not as important to just go straight into Thunderstruck. But that's what I did, because when I made this, I have all that stuff. What you can do is go into Heightened Malice first, and you'll probably get more value out of the Heightened Malice first most of the time if you're still leveling up and you don't have like all the stats and stuff you need. But here we are going to go for Electrocution. This is going to make any lightning bolt effect we have do 554% more damage. However, that actually is not even necessarily the reason we run this. The main reason we run this is because it gives us a 20% multiplicative damage buff against anything that has been hit by our lightning bolt. And that's also why I like to run Rune Workers, because we are specifically getting a lightning bolt from this, so it is being buffed quite a lot by that. So I do like that. Then I just kind of sweep over here, pick up some critical strike damage, crowd control damage. Then I'm going to come over here, we're going to pick up Heightened Malice, and then we are going to go ahead and throw Spirit in here. This is going to give us 194% critical strike damage, as well as a nice multiplicative damage buff. Then we are going to come up through here, swing around, and then we're going to take Werewolf just to get the 10% damage reduction while in Werewolf form. I'm not too worried about the damage here. The main reason I took this was just for the damage reduction. And I come up over here just because there's a lot of basic skill damage over here, so it's pretty good on this build. Then I swing over here. Oh my gosh, mouse is having a conniption. And then finally I kind of finish out with Undaunted. So because we fortify so much, I like to have a bunch of damage while fortified, as well as more damage reduction while fortified. Now there is a couple things that I have seen people do. If you want to try it out, is I've seen people take this one earlier and they kind of split between here and here, and then they also take things like Fang and Claw and stuff like that. But I don't know, I personally am not like the biggest fan of Fang and Claw, because you have to remember that like Fang and Claw aren't like the worst depending on what it is you need. Like they can give you where's it at? or like Earth and Sky here, right? So it grants 90% bonus to all magic nodes. Like they can give you a decent amount of extra stats, but you have to use them really strategically, and it really makes you have to think a lot more about what you're doing. And it's really not for that much more payoff. And to be honest with you, I think going things like Undaunted and stuff is just better, because yeah, you get a 10% multiplicative damage buff, but a 10% multiplicative damage buff is equivalent to like 50% additive damage most of the time. So if you get 100% here, that means you're getting like the equivalent of a 20% multiplicative damage buff, plus you're getting damage reduction, so you're not getting like an insane amount of value out of this. So in my opinion, I mean, I think the main reason why they can be good is because you can get extra defensive stats. I think that's the main lure of them and why they would be good. But yeah, so yeah, but that's kind of the reasoning behind the Paragon and the way that I have done everything. But yeah, so anyways guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you next time. Thanks.